Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to break down the key insights from your source material, really cut through the noise. And today we've got a really fascinating set of documents. They focus on Olatunji Along's analysis of, well, public pressure, resilience, and emotional intelligence. And the case study used is the career of footballer Harry Maguire. Quite a journey there.
That's right. And, this deep dive, it isn't really about football tactics or scores. Not at all. Our mission here is to pull out a kind of universal blueprint for recovery, how humans bounce back. Alonge makes the case that Maguire's story is, and I'm quoting here, a masterclass on the human spirit. And he introduces this really interesting concept that kind of holds it all together, sociomimicry.
Okay, sociomimicry, let's just nail that down right away. What exactly is that? The source defines it as learning and modeling successful design, but not from nature, like biomimicry. This is from people, from society.
Exactly. So instead of just seeing Maguire's ups and downs as, one athlete's story, we're encouraged to view it as a template, a proven one, almost reverse engineered, for handling intense public scrutiny, for turning failure into fuel. We're looking at how you rise stronger. And the key is, it's not about ignoring the pain. It's about decoding it. Because the core idea presented is pretty striking. Every one of us is a Maguire destined to go through a quagmire.
Wow. Okay, so let's unpack that blueprint then, starting at the beginning with the foundation. Alonge calls this first phase the Golden Summit. Where does that resilience start for Maguire?
It really starts back in Sheffield, the Colossus of Sheffield, as the author puts it. He had these very solid working-class roots, grounded, stable, practical. And that gave him this crucial emotional inheritance. There's this great example of his mother's advice, like a mantra. Harry, if you fall, get up quicker than you went down. That's not just, keep trying. It's an instruction. Persistence is expected.
Right. And you see that mindset early on, don't you, in his playing style. He wasn't the quickest guy on the field, but he learned to read the game, see trouble before it arrived. But the really critical piece, the bit Along highlights, is his attitude at the Sheffield United Academy. He apparently took correction from coaches, not as an insult, not personally, but as insight, as data for getting better.
Yeah, and that's emotional intelligence in action, isn't it? Even if nobody called it that back then. He was focused on mastery, pure and simple, not ego. Building that internal strength, that self-awareness. But the source also warns us that success itself, it brings its own pressures. It's a test too.
That's interesting. You'd think success just makes things easier, right? Validates you. But it adds risk.
It does. When he moved up to Hull City, his mother, the author calls her the prophet of balance, gave him this quiet warning, and it's something that applies to anyone getting a promotion or hitting a new level. Don't lose your feet when the ground gets shiny. Success without that self-awareness, Alonge writes, it just becomes a shiny version of confusion.
Okay, that definitely sets the stage for the next chapter, the really big challenge. He reaches the top Old Trafford, the theater of dreams, and suddenly he's the most expensive defender in the world. 80 million pounds then captain. That number, that status, it represents these almost impossible expectations, right? Global scrutiny. The source says that massive honor quickly turned into a kind of verdict waiting to happen.
Exactly. That weight, the price tag, the captaincy, it fundamentally changed the pressure. It stopped feeling like, motivation, something to strive for, and started feeling like constant surveillance. Just think about that feeling internally. Every pass, every tackle, every single mistake, judged against that enormous figure.
So how did that external judgment start to break things down internally? What was the mechanism?
Well, the unraveling was subtle at first, but really damaging. A defender relies on instinct, split-second decisions. When pressure turns into that feeling of surveillance, it introduces hesitation, just a tiny delay. But those split-second doubts, they delayed his instinct. And that led to the errors everyone jumped on. He was sort of momentarily frozen.
And the public reaction? It was just brutal. We all saw it. Pundits piling on social media, just tearing him apart with memes, mockery. It's hard to imagine that level of judgment, mistake after mistake, amplified globally. Does the source sort of imply we, the public, play a role in breaking down that instinct?
The source definitely acknowledges the toxicity of it all. It highlights this dangerous psychological shift. Maguire started playing not to lose, that defensive, fear-driven approach, instead of playing to win, which needs freedom, confidence. And that fear cycle really intensified after the crisis point, the arrest in Greece. The scrutiny became unbearable.
But that humiliation, difficult as it was, maybe brought some clarity.
It seems so. It crystallized a pretty painful truth, one that resonates if you've ever relied too much on public opinion. Fame is a mirror that only shows you when you're shining. When the light dims, you disappear. And that realization led to a critical internal shift, a decision that changed his path. He started journaling. He wrote a new creed for himself.
Okay, this feels like the real turning point in the analysis, moving from being reactive to proactive. And that creed was, I will not let public perception cancel private purpose. Powerful stuff. What did he do immediately after that?
Well, that creed wasn't just words. It was a catalyst for action. It led to what the source calls his surgical retreat. He realized, quite profoundly, you can't heal in the same environment that made you sick. So he stopped reading the papers, turned off social media comments, basically built a protective bubble to recover.
That distance, physically and mentally, must have created space for new input. Was there a key piece of advice that shifted things internally?
Yeah, it apparently came from old youth coach. Very simple, very direct. Stop proving, start playing again. And that hit home. He realized he'd been performing for peace, desperately trying to quiet the critics by pleasing them. Instead of performing from peace, grounding himself back in why he started, his love for the game, whatever the noise around him.
That shift from needing external validation to finding internal grounding, that's the start of the real rebuild, isn't it? The inner work. The comeback began in private. And the source mentions mindfulness, meditation, as a key tool he started using.
Right, and not just as some, trendy wellness thing. He saw it as a practical, almost mechanical advantage.
Right.
Calm mind, better perception, better decisions, cleaner passes, sharper tackles. He treated his mind like a muscle that needed rehab.
And the most practical tool discussed is reframing. It's taught by a sports psychologist. Now, reframing is quite well known, but how did Maguire specifically use it? How did it turn emotion into evolution, as the source puts it?
Reframing is essentially about cognitive replacement, right? You catch a negative or limiting thought, and you consciously, deliberately swap it for one that serves you better. It's not about denying the feeling, like pretending pressure doesn't exist, but it's about repurposing the energy behind that feeling.
Can you give us an example? Maybe not just a sports one. The ones in the source are good, but they go by fast.
Sure. A classic example from the material. Instead of thinking, I'm under pressure and I might fail, you reframe it to, I'm being prepared for the next level, or this pressure shows I'm operating at a high level. So if you apply that to, say, a tough deadline at work, instead of, I'm drowning in this impossible workload, you could reframe it to, okay, this workload means I'm trusted with significant responsibility. It's a chance to show my capacity.
Okay, but what about the really nasty stuff, like online trolls? Surely some criticism is just malice, not useful feedback. How does reframing handle that?
Well, that's kind of the beauty of it, according to the analysis. You control the reframe, not the critic. So if the thought is, they hate me, the reframe isn't, oh, they secretly admire me. That's delusion. The reframe could be, they're criticizing me, which means I'm visible, I'm relevant enough to attract this attention. The source of the critique almost becomes secondary. It's about managing your internal response. And that leads us neatly into the 4 EQ principles that guided his rebuild.
Right, let's lay those out. They seem really central for anyone listening. First, awareness before adjustment.
Yeah, you can't fix what you don't acknowledge, right?
Right.
It means pausing, accurately labeling the emotion. Is it fear? Wounded pride? Simple exhaustion?
Yeah.
Then you try to solve the problem. So in business, maybe you recognize stress not as I am failing, but as my capacity is overloaded right now. Awareness first.
Okay. Second, ownership before outcome.
This one's huge for managing anxiety. Focus on what you can control, your effort, your preparation, your input. Take full ownership of that. But consciously release control over the final result, the outcome. You can't fully control that.
Yeah.
For you listening, maybe it means preparing meticulously for a big pitch. Own that prep. Whether you win the contract or not, that's just data, not a verdict on your worth.
Makes sense. Third, empathy before ego.
This is really about leadership, but applies broadly. Instead of seeing people, teammates, colleagues, family, just as tools to get what you want, try to see them as humans with their own pressures, their own stuff going on. When you prioritize understanding their perspective, you build connection, loyalty. It's way more effective than just trying to control people, which usually breeds resentment.
And the fourth principle, reflection before reaction.
Pause. Just pause. Especially now, with instant feedback everywhere, this is harder but more vital than ever. Don't fire off that angry email. Don't make the snap decision in the heat of the moment. That pause lets your rational brain catch up. It lets you turn raw emotion into a considered strategy.
So these principles, they weren't just about getting his football career back on track. They build a lasting structure for dealing with any adversity. And that structure is what we can learn from. Allange uses these two great acronyms to frame the lessons, starting with the challenge itself. The Quagmire. It stands for the quicksand of doubt. Unseen pressures, anger, grief, isolation, and exhaustion. That's the state we can all find ourselves in sometimes.
Yeah, that captures it well. And the map out of that quagmire is Maguire's 5-rung ladder. This is the practical step-by-step climb.
Okay, rung 1, self-awareness. Pausing before panic.
The absolute foundation. Knowing your triggers, knowing when you're running on empty, knowing when that negative inner voice starts up. You can't climb if you don't know where you are.
Rung 2, self-management. Breathing instead of braking.
This is applying that pause. When the pressure hits, use a technique. Deep breaths, walk away for 5 minutes, music, whatever works for you. Anything to interrupt that immediate fight or flight surge. Stop that moment of pressure becoming a full-blown meltdown.
Rung 3, self-motivation. And this is key, refinement, not revenge.
Yes, your drive can't just be about, I'll show them. That keeps the critics at the center of your world.
Yeah.
True self-motivation, the sustainable kind, is about refinement. Just aiming to be slightly better today than yesterday. It's an internal game, not an external battle.
Rung 4, empathy. Seeing critics as mirrors.
This links back to the reframing idea. Instead of enemies, see critics as mirrors. Sometimes, yeah, they reflect a genuine flaw you need to work on. Other times, they just reflect their own issues back at you. Either way, the interaction gives you information. It doesn't have to control you. And finally, rung 5, social intelligence. Leadership is connection, not control. This is the top of the ladder. Once you've got a handle on your inner world, you can connect more authentically with others. Real leadership, real influence, isn't about forcing people. It's about inspiring belief, building trust, connection.
And all that comprehensive inner work, it did lead to a visible comeback on the pitch, injury crisis. He gets called back, scores a crucial goal. But the real win, as you said earlier, wasn't shutting up the critics or even the goal itself. It was the internal state, that calm mind, rooted in this understanding that validation is sugar sweet but fleeting. Peace is protein, lasting nourishment.
Exactly. And that whole lived experience, that journey, distills down into what Allange calls the Maguire Code. This is presented as universal life logic, EQ in action. Let's pull out maybe the 3 strongest truths from that code, things that apply way beyond sport. First, pain is a teacher, not an enemy. Stop seeing setbacks as personal attacks. Ask, what's the lesson here? That unlocks growth.
Okay. Second, criticism is feedback wearing a mask. Don't just react defensively to every negative comment, filter it. Is there a grain of truth, even if it's delivered harshly? If yes, it's a disguised coach. If no, it's just noise, let it go.
And the third one, which really captures the long game, persistence outlasts perception. Public perception. It's loud, it's fickle, it changes like the wind. But if you consistently show up, act with integrity, do the work, eventually the narrative tends to catch up with the reality. You don't really defeat perception, you outlast it.
So that brings us to the final contrast laid out in the source. We talked about the quagmire, the doubt, pressure, isolation, and now we understand the Maguire, the transformation that emerges. Mindfulness, authenticity, grit, understanding, integrity, resilience, and enlightenment. The quagmire is the test. The Maguire is the transformed state.
Yeah, and Allange's final takeaway is powerful. The quagmire wasn't there to bury him. It was there to build him. The real difference between staying stuck down there and climbing out, standing tall, is not the weight you carry, but the way you carry it.
Yeah.
It all comes down to perspective.
And the author leaves us with this really resonant image of final thought to anchor that shift. I'm not buried, I'm being planted.
Powerful. And that leads directly to our final challenge for you, the listener. As you think about this deep dive about resilience, the source material kind of prompts us all to identify our own Maguire moment. You know, that point where you realize the outside noise, the world's opinion, just can't compete with your own inner permission to move forward.
So the challenge is to ask yourself this question, posed in the source. What is your purpose when applause disappears? Definitely something to reflect on, internalize, and maybe build upon until our next deep dive.